Hi everyone. For this class, we're going to go over blocks and how blocks are a incredible tool for AutoCAD to speed up your design. And this is the main reason why I find that AutoCAD is so much faster than hand drawing, because instead of having to hand draw this object, you know, every single time, I simply do CO for the copy command, and then faster than anybody can draw these, I can now drop them. And then even this, all of a sudden, through copying, I can make large amounts of trees, and then I can easily then grab them and respace them if I needed to change my layout with having to redraw it, and then delete them very quickly. And the advantage with a block is essentially a grouping of your line work into a single item. So a block will have a name, and then this block, it will have typically a insertion point, and then this allows you to drop it in. So this is from a landscape architect. It's their tree symbol. Here's another tree symbol. And when we go into it, it's called going into the block editor. So what I do is I select the block. So I'm left clicking on the block, and then once it's selected, I right click and I go to block editor. And now I'm in block editor. You can see up here, it says block editor, close block. And so these are just all layers and lines. You can see when I switch back to the home tab that this is the tree canopy layer. And then there's a different layer, non-plot tree layer. And so this is, you can have multiple layers, all these type of items within a block. And then I'm going to close the block. It's going to ask if I want to save or discard. I'm going to discard because I didn't do anything. So I didn't save anything. But this is then all on one layer. And then I can put, even though this consists of two layers, I then would put this, let's say I want this on, this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to put it on an equipment layer. Now this block is on an equipment layer. So that can get really tricky. But it's nice because I can go through and then if I layer isolate this, that didn't do what I wanted. But I could save this where it's only on that layer. The reason why it didn't layer isolate was because it shut off the other two layers, which are inside the block. But so then with irrigation heads, it's really easy. So over here in my palettes, this is what, this is an 8-foot quarter head. So this is a block that I can put in, and then I can rotate. And so now that head is in there, and here's the insertion point, and I can drag it wherever I need to. Here's another cool thing with blocks. Let's say I lay out all these blocks, and if I go into Express Tools, if I want to replace the block, so now I'm just going to pick the block to be replaced. So let's say I want them all to look like this block. So now I'm going to pick the one to replace it. And I don't want it purged at the end, so I'm going to say no. But now you see it changed all those blocks to the block that I said. So it's a really easy way to then make fast changes. So I can undo it. So in a block, unless you're using some advanced features, when I change it, it changes all those blocks. So I drew a line. Every single one of those now has that line in it. So that's very important to note. Now I took the line out. Now it's gone from all the blocks. So that can be good because now it's applying it to everything, but that can also be bad because if you wanted something specific to only this block, you'd either have to do an attribute or actually make it into a different block entirely. But then to show some advanced thing with blocks is in here, this is a block. I drop it in from my legend item. And now I have these cool little pull downs that now it changes the text of this block. And then one of my favorite that I do is normally blocks are static, but this block, if I want to make my note frame bigger or smaller, I just grab on this and I can pull down, make it bigger, make it smaller. This is recycled water, but if I want to change it to domestic water, now it shows the domestic water. Okay. What else? I have this for my north arrow. You know, we've got to have north arrow on our plan. So I stick it in, but let's say then I want to rotate it without having to use the rotate command. This block has a rotate item in it. So I can then just rotate it whichever way north is. On a scale bar, I have the scale bar. And then I can choose what scale I want, and it puts in the numbers for me. So 1 inch equals 20 feet. Okay. So now you kind of see what blocks are and how they're used. Everything that I use pretty much is all in blocks. Where is it? So here, what I'm pasting in here is actually one big block, which when I put it in, it explodes it. I'll tell you more about exploding. But then these now are individual blocks. And then again, this one, I can choose between the two items. So all my notes are blocks. All my, pretty much most things except the only things that I don't do as blocks is my pipes, because those are polylines. And then my hatching isn't blocks, but all my symbols are blocks. So when I'm putting in heads or over here, this is a valve symbol. This is a block. So when I go into it, block editor, each one of these is just, that's a polyline, that's a hatch, that's a hatch, that's a hatch, and that's a hatch. And that's what makes up all that equipment. Okay. So you're saying, this is great, Gary, but what do I do from here? So, okay, I'm going to show you some easy ways to start making blocks. So let's say I am going to draw So I'm kind of replicating that other block that I had. So now I have this line work. And now I can come in here and under insert, I can select create block, or you can just type in block, B-L-O-C-K, enter. And now I'm going to name it, come up with a neat name. We try and come up with names so that they're all kind of grouped together, because you can end up with a bunch of different blocks. So like you can see if it's a symbol, I do SYM. So I'm going to call this SYM. And then I'm going to call it square. Ooh, can't type. Now I'm going to pick the point. So this is going to be my insertion point. So typically, you know, if I want that in the middle, like the trees were, so I'm going to click that in the middle. You can then, you know, if you're in inches, feet, units, I usually do mine in unitless, but you know, if you did yours at a certain scale of feet or inches, that's where you'd select the units. And then we want it to convert to a block. We're going to select the objects. So this is selecting all the objects that we want in the block. I always want to scale uniformity and to allow exploding. And I'll go into this. But then when I hit OK, now you can see it put the insertion point, which is your blue grip, right here where we selected it. It's a scale of 1 to 1 to 1. And see, this is the importance about scale uniformity. If I scale it up by 2, it does both X, or all three X, Y, and Z all together. If you don't do it as uniformly, then as soon as I did this, actually I will change this. Instead of uniformly, I'm going to go not uniformly. So when I go back to this, if I change this to 1, you're going to see it then it is no longer proportional. Now it's kind of squished it. So then I have to change the X, Y scales all at the same time. So if you want it always to stay at the right scale, go back into block editor and scale uniformly. Okay. So now I have the block. So one thing I can do, let's say I want to add this to my tool palette here. I select it by left clicking, and then this is the only thing. I don't grab on the blue insertion point. I left click and hold, and you'll see a little bounding box appear around my, my cursor. And then I drag it over here into my palette. Oh, one important thing. To do that, you have to save your drawing. So I'm going to save my drawing here. So now I left click to select it, and then left click and hold. I'm holding the mouse the entire time. I drag it over to the tool palette, and now you can see my symbol is there. And now when I want to use it, I just click on it. I put it in. Click on it, put it in, or I can just hit spacebar again, and since it remembers, I can just keep adding as many as I want. So let's say for some reason, oh, the other thing is I can type insert. Like let's say I'm not using my tool palette for some reason, I can insert. And why isn't it letting me? Is then I can select the block that I want to insert, and then it lets me do it that way. So that's a much slower process because you're picking from this list. That's why I have all these multiple tool palettes with all our blocks in it.